consciousness education on evolution and the perspective of love triangles. So today I wanted to talk to you around a topic that comes up in the evolutionary process of transformation in the form of remembrance and spiritual enlightenment that comes up in many forms and many dimensions. It is confusing to the human narrative based on conditioning and the different presentations that it comes up in. So this is going to be a small deep dive into the Trinity awareness, inspired by some recent events that have occurred in relation to the confusion around polyamory, the confusion around open relating, and the confusion around what may occur when one is attracted to the dynamic that is outside our conditioning or our story of monogamy. And this requires a little bit of base education, but if you haven't received any of my videos before, I'm Geeia Ariati. I am the founder and co-creator of the DAC process, a revolutionary modality to transform in total healing and the evolution of one's life. And I'm the master teacher at the Purity of Isis Mystery School. I'm a channel, I am a conduit, I am an educator of consciousness, and I am a divine feminine woman. And this is not going to be a channel transmission. This is really assisting those to educate themselves in many ways of interpreting their own self-identity through the manifestation of what one might call a love triangle. Now, for many individuals, this can be something that comes up in friendships. This can be something that comes up through the form of a relationship dynamic. There can be push and pull. There can be what you might call infidelity that comes into a dynamic where this love triangle is not understood for the offering and the opportunity it is. Before we go into any interpretation specifically around love triangle, we got to look at the interpretation of understanding the three-dimensional realm and the Trinity. So in this reality, we are three-dimensional human beings. We require 3 dimensions of a perspective to interpret reality. So everything that we do is based on 3-dimensional perspectives of bringing in some form of form and separation and self-mirroring, whether or not we're whether or not we are consciously aware of it, or it is something that is moving through the subconscious, the unconscious, the ego. There is always 3 perspectives to every experience that is taking place. And that shows up in the form of things like mother, father, child, and I think they call it the molecular family, and the different forms of the persecutor, rescuer, and victim dynamic of psychology shows up in the dynamics of give, take, and being, right? So there are many, many, many forms that in any point of time you will be able to find this trinity, this sacred triangle that will give you the information to your evolution and to use it if you know how to interpret it. So this one that we are talking on is specifically based on the love triangle and how this shows up in the different dimensions. Specifically, I'm speaking into the 1-dimensional manifestation, 3-dimensional, 5th dimensional, 7th dimensional, and 11th dimensional. The reason that I'm not focusing on the other areas is because it gets very complex. We're talking about reality. We're talking about a realm of existence from each of these dimensions that becomes very complex, and there are many different beliefs, many different manifestations, and it can become too muddied and confusing in the communication. So we're going through some jumps specifically because these in-between realities that are not mentioned are ones that you could say are the blurred lines. These are where you might have the manifestation of both realms that show up. It's the middle point. So you'll be able to look at this and sort of discover whereabouts this middle point is reflected to you and how it's presented to you in your journey in the form of friendships, relationships, and other ways that you would like to see this masculine, feminine expression. Now, I guess the best place to start is to look at the origin point of why is it 1 man and 2 women? Why? Why is that the Trinity concept? Why is it not 2 men and 1 woman? And I mean, I'm not going to say that it hasn't existed. I don't know many. I don't know any that have ever existed, but I'm sure they do because we are in an infinite universe. But the reason that we have the one man and two women also is based on the chromosomes. So the man has an XY chromosome and the woman have two Y. And this represents a specific energetic vibration, a specific way of being able to hold information and the biological makeup. We look at polarity in a really simple way. Two masculines repel each other. So two masculines in a trinity just wouldn't work. That's energy. That's the positive and negative ions of information. Two masculines cannot be in a trinity unless one of the males, and that's where it's different, a male was holding a feminine energy. That would make a different interpretation of this. And so two feminine, however, two feminine expressions, two feminine charges dance around each other. And you might have seen this before. It doesn't repel, but they do a dance in the electric expression of the energetics. But when you are able to interpret the understanding of the Trinity from the origins of the biology, meaning two masculine repel, so that doesn't work, the XY and the YY chromosomes being that they work together in the form of that the feminine, from a biological standpoint, requires the masculine for aspects that they don't naturally hold within. Now, this is not to say that feminine are less than. It's to say that the feminine physicality, the feminine body, actually doesn't have the same capacity as the masculine. The masculine creates more testosterone. The masculine has an ability to hold and conduct more energy, more chi, more kundalini, and it makes them a highly charged battery. And that battery sometimes requires more output than what one individual expression of a connection point is. Now, I'm not saying that everyone needs to go and get themselves into a trinity. I'm definitely not saying that you can't work in unity. And what I'm going to express by the time you get to the end of this video is that this paradigm is collapsed when you come into the presence of this within yourself. And that's what it's teaching you. It's teaching you the self-interpretation of these energetic vibrations so that you can be unified within, and you no longer require the other counterpart for what has been either borrowed, siphoned, substituted, taught, or brought through in some form of external expression. So in the origins, and we go back to the Anunnaki, we had a masculine as the primary king or the primary leader of the 12 families, and he was supported by two feminine. So it was a god and two goddess. Now, these two goddesses came from a lower dimensional reality, which meant they didn't have as much charge, as much energy, as much frequency. And so this original expression of the divine blueprint existed. It's been taken from societal interpretation and information. It's only coming back for those that are ready to collapse the paradigms of conditioning and to release the story of hierarchy and to understand the expression of energy for what it is. So the masculine, or the kings of these 12 families, came in with a higher dimensional interpretation of consciousness, a higher evolution of information that was held within their vessel. And the women came from a dimension that was of a lower, so they held less charge, they held less energy, which meant that they actually couldn't meet in union the form of the original tribes. So a woman could not keep up with the masculine because she didn't hold the same reciprocal expression of energy. And this created a fragmentation, as we know, around the confusions of hierarchy, of men being more stronger leaders, having more intellect. This was the original hierarchical disruption in the form of what we might call the patriarchy. This dynamic of holding the masculine at the top of this Trinity concept, and the woman is then, if you imagine these lines of these triangles going down further and further, you have more and more beings that come through here until you get to a baseline, and it is filled with energetic expression. So these triangles actually make up the Merkaba, and they come into a big collective expression of information, and they work as a whole. But because we didn't understand now the full interpretation of geometry and the full interpretation of the unique lineages of information, there's been a lot of confusion and inversion. To fully interpret and understand this, we need to first recognize that having more energy or more charge does not make you more highly evolved. Okay, it means that you function from a vibration, a frequency, or a reality that has more information. But it doesn't mean the embodied expression is of the highest intellect. And it also means that we need each other in the form of interpreting reality and providing different aspects that one can't. So from the interpretation of the beginnings, the masculine required the feminine to assist him with the spirit connection, or the presence of spirit in the form of the channel of source, the channel of God, the channel of recalibration, the kundalini current. This was required for him based on his amount of charge, because he needed it to defibrillate. The masculine needed the feminine to assist with the charge and the movement of energy itself. Because the masculine has so much charge, the receiving was inadequate in the male vessel or the male form. Now, without going further into the origins, because that can make it a more complex conversation, we're going to look at how this interpretation has been skewed and how it presents in each dimension to understand where you're sitting and why it was relatively important. So if we look back and we just recap, the masculine required the feminine so that there wasn't too much charge. So he was able to release his charge. He was able to release his chi. He was able to be rejuvenated by the God molecule and the spirit molecule in these feminine. And these women were highly evolved conduits, high priestess and goddess expressions that were able to be this. And they did not have the jealousy, the story, the mutation around the concepts of give and take, and knew their role to each other, because actually the feminine require each other. And two feminine energies, and we see this in sisterhood, require each other in the form of the reciprocal dance. The masculine doesn't have the same capacity until he evolves into his wholeness, his oneness, to dance the dance of the consciousness expression in all directions and all ways. He has a penetrative force and he has a strong charge of information. He can give and he can give, but he also struggles with the receiving aspect. And so the feminine likes to dance, likes to give and receive in her true flow and expression of nature. When we look at this in what is present, and is present in many different representations, we have relationships that we might call polyamorous. We have different curiosity explorations of the human evolution in sexuality and relationship. We have some highly evolved beings that are trying to be this Trinity and to present it from a place of non-judgment. And then we also have the undercurrents, the undershadows. Those are the things that we don't often hear about, the things that might be going on in what we would call perhaps the realms of the adult entertainment industry. So the 1D shows up a lot in adult entertainment and in these sort of shadowy concepts of reality. And we see this in pornography. And I want to explain it from the energetics and how it provides you to see exactly what you're needing at that time to evolve out of it, or if it is your truth to hold it, how to balance it and evolve the Trinity so that you're able to hold it in a way that is supportive to your individual expression. All beings can be in a sacred love triangle. All beings can be in a love triangle, and all beings have been in a love triangle. All beings have presented either consciously or unconsciously in this format. And all women have felt a sense of attraction to other women, whether they're honest with themselves about it or they're not, because it's a natural state of their biology. It's a natural state of their consciousness. For women to be attracted to other women is because of the energetic dance that is created. Now, that interpretation gets muddied based on trauma, confusion, collective consciousness, mutations, and feeding, and different ways that that shows up. Yet it is natural for woman and woman to be attracted to each other and to want to be in sensuality, not necessarily sexuality. Whereas masculines, men are not genetically made up to be attracted to men. Now, that is based on two masculine energies repulse each other. So when there are that of what we would consider LGBT community, and I know I've missed some pronouns there, so forgive me, that there is an expression of one of the vessels that is in the opposing energy. It's the only way that these relationship dynamics can work and can be of support. And that is purely from the presentation. So we're going to start with the three-dimensional presentation of the love triangle. The three-dimensional presentation of here is the masculine, the feminine. You can see here the circle. The energy is moving through this circular expression. It's moving around. Now that's because in the three-dimensional trinity, when one comes into three-dimensional love in a three-dimensional consciousness, they believe themselves to be bisexual in a form of this is what works for us. And there's a complete avoidance of the outside world. So as you can see, the energy is circulated within. It's actually very harmonious in a three-dimensional expression of consciousness because they're able to see the simplicity of it. They're able to see that the woman maybe can't keep up with the masculine sexual needs. The woman might want support in the family home. The woman might feel like she doesn't have the ability to care for all of her children. And this dynamic on a three-dimensional lens allows for the masculine to get his sexual needs met and to be able to go out and be of service in his work and to work long hours and then come back and know that his woman has been, or his women have been supported. They support each other. They receive what in a traditional monogamous three-dimensional reality relationship doesn't hold. The woman's always wanting more nurturing from the man. The man's always wanting to express more sexuality than she can handle. And this is what happens. This is the truth of it, is that the three-dimensional expression is the man feels like he doesn't get his sexual needs met, and the woman doesn't feel like she gets her emotional or support needs met. So a three-dimensional trinity is very supportive in the form of we just keep everything inside our house. Now that means the outside world doesn't exist. We don't need to hear, we don't need to share, we don't need to, and it won't be a very public thing. It might be something that goes behind closed doors. It might be something that looks as though a wife and a friend living at the house. It might look as though dynamic of friendship or a form of what we might say some of the spiritual and religious dynamics are in that the masculine has multiple wives. Now this concept is very, very supportive because the energy moves in all directions. It doesn't actually move in directions. If you see that circle in the center of the three-dimension, it orbs. So they create a being, a three-dimensional being that meets all of their needs. Now, to be that, and to be harmonious of that, you cannot step into a lower or a higher dimensional expression of that triangle, of that love triangle. When we start to step inside other dimensions, when one of those males or females decides to evolve or one decides to descend, that's when the triangle won't work in harmony. That's when things start to show up in wounding, distortion, and manipulation to see thyself. So when one individual decides to evolve or descends, which is a form of evolution, into understanding their shadow or higher expressions of themselves, then they'll start to navigate this Trinity in other forms. They will start to see that that concept didn't work. They'll start to see different aspects where there'll be triggers. They'll start to feel jealousy. They'll start to feel the 7 deadly sins. So we're going to descend now, and we're going to say, okay, one of those males and females chose to descend. We'll say the feminine chose to descend. She chose to look at herself in her root chakra. She decided to decide how much of her reality was supporting her in the unmet self, right? She wants more for her life. She doesn't want to just be at home and to be a housewife anymore. She wants to find this intensity within her, right? So she's going through this process of evolution through the form of descending into her shadow, a dark night of the soul. And what she starts to do is she starts to attract. She'll leave that relationship. It will no longer be harmonious. It will no longer meet her needs. And she'll move into a dynamic where she starts to dance in the realms of the shadows of sexuality, where she starts to feel a sense of empowerment. She might get addicted to things like, or curious around her body. She might go into the forms of wanting to be a dancer. Maybe she'll go into the adult entertainment industry. Maybe she has a fetish. She's using classified ads, and she might be using different apps to get her needs met. And she'll end up finding herself in a dynamic where she is in the form of an equal expression of this. So this often happens in moments of boozy intoxication. This might happen through drugs and alcohol. This might happen through the sex industry, where two women decide to what appears to be a dynamic of high sexual charge. So the one-dimensional consciousness is all about sexual energy. It's about being in the sexual expression. It's not about passion. It's about discovering one's fetishes. It's about how deep or how hard you could interact with someone. How much can you take? So that's a good interpretation. How much can I take? Because in this dynamic, you have the energy from the center is coming from higher dimensional expressions. This is where chords, siphons, and different formations of connection to other outside beings gets drawn into the Trinity, and it's sucked down and then fed off in this sexual act. So this inverted Trinity pulls from higher dimensions, might pull from other soul family, it might pull from friends or relationships outside of this Trinity, and it draws and sucks the life force and the chi down into this dynamic where they all have a nice feeding, right? That's what that satanic Trinity is. It holds this really intense charge, this really addictive magnetic frequency that you like, I just can't get enough. And that is very much in the sexual expression. It is very much this ritualized form of what addiction through porn and different sexual expressions does. It's I need that, I want that, and it can be very obsessive on the mind and overtake that experience of all three beings, because they start to feed on a form of life force that they're not holding or maintaining within themselves. And so this can be sat in for a long period of time. People can sit in this dimension because they're getting their needs met through the denial of the distortions. So it works because the denial of distortions. All of them hold denials. All of them have greed. All of them have lust. All of them have this 7 deadly sin framework of discovering themselves. And there's no need to look outside of that. There's no need to self-reflect because it feels so good. And this is what you see with addiction and pornography, is that because it feels so good, I don't need to change. Why would I change if it feels so good? You just get your next hook, your next hookup, your next experience, and you're obsessed about that. So that's how the one-dimensional functions. And it is only when one can start to evolve and see beyond that point and either move back up to the 3-dimension. I've played in it long enough. I see this feeding. There might be an awakening. There's movements, right? Because it's very hard for a human being to function in only one reality. We are multidimensional. And so a one-dimensional being, or experience, I should say, in the Trinity. So the Trinity might be in the 1D, but you might have the male or the female functioning from a higher dimension and from the 7th dimension. And that means that they're tethering between this obsession and also a different knowing of possibility. We're going to jump up to the 5th dimension now. Now, the 5th dimension is interesting because it is what you could say the middle way, the middle point. Now, the 5th dimension is where there is a level of what we would call a substitution of energy. So we're able to hold our own frequency, we're able to be within our own frequency, but what happens is the masculine and the feminine, so they all do this, they're all mirrors to the exact same expression, is that the male, the female, and the two females will substitute what they're missing from within with the other counterparts. So if it was the male, for instance, there is going to be a recognition that the masculine is looking for love, looking for attraction, looking for connection, looking for validation. And the masculine will be looking for this from both of the feminines. Now, the feminines, based on this, one will be more in her light feminine, one will be more in their dark feminine. And so this means that he is trying to meet his dark masculine, and his light masculine in the polarities. And what happens in the substitution of these dynamics is that the individual is looking to see where they're out of balance with their own masculine energy or feminine energy. And what it shows up in is this relationship dynamic of where you see individuals going, I love how I feel with this person. I'm going to give all of my energy here because I love how I feel. And she gives me this. But what he gives her is different. He'll give her a different expression of himself. So he's dancing between his masculine and his light masculine and his dark masculine. And he's being his dark masculine here and his light masculine here. And she's giving her light feminine and she's giving her dark feminine. And there's a different dynamic. There's a different expression that gets invoked. That's the substitution. Oh, I feel so sexual with you. Oh, I feel so safe with you. And so this dynamic happens because we're unable to be sexual with ourselves and unable to be safe within our body. And so then what happens in this form is these feminines either never meet each other, yet energetically they're tied based on him, and they have the opposing energies. So the dark feminine is trying to find her light feminine. She's trying to understand her purity. She's trying to interpret herself through higher consciousness. The light feminine is looking to find her reconnection to her strengths, to her conviction, to not being a pushover, to being able to be strong in her passion or her purpose or her voice. And so this dynamic here means that they as feminine will either never meet each other. This is a dynamic. 5th dimensional love triangles don't work. They are not supportive because there is too much splitting between selves, light and dark, and it's what you could call a bipolar, push and pull. It doesn't have the same synergistic, harmonious expression as the 3 and the 1 dimensional for the reasons that have been shown. In this, you then have a recognition where one of them, one of the feminines will decide that this is no longer something that I want. I don't want to be with a man that's in a polyamorous relationship with another woman, or I don't want to be in a sexual connection with another woman, based on the denial of their own inner feminine. So the masculine has, I guess, the viewpoint of he is receiving his needs because he is coming from a point of flipping between both sides of himself. But that becomes very confusing because he wants both. So there is a lot of confusion in the form of he wants to be his light masculine and his dark masculine. He wants to be able to be all of himself, yet he feels unable to be all of himself with this specific woman because she's the mirror. So what you mirror to each other is what you will get back. If you've got a dark masculine presentation with a specific individual, that will bring up their dark feminine, and vice versa. So this is the opportunity for a fifth dimensional being that's going through this, and you're seeing this in the dynamic of yourself, that you see, oh, the reason that the dark and the light feminine judge each other so much. One thinks they're more pure, one thinks they're more powerful. This feminine dynamic is really uncomfortable and they don't want to see each other, whereas the masculine sits in the confusion of who do I want to be? Do I want to be this or do I want to be that? And it's an opportunity to start to marry and merge, so the energy can start to move in a different way. So as you can see, the energy direction is projection. I'm giving you this, I'm taking that. I'm giving you this, I'm taking that. So it's an exchange, substitution. When we go into the seventh dimensional expression of the love triangle, you have the awareness that there is a wanting of both, but an inability to be with both. So when you get to the seventh dimensional realm of the love triangle, you have the masculine that wants both women. No longer does he want one or the other. He can see that he can have both. So this is where unity consciousness starts to become a possibility. This is where higher dimensional, beyond conditioning, beyond monogamy, beyond being the awkward, the weird, it's like an awareness that I actually want both of these realities, but I can't see how. So there is a point of being more connected with oneself in both the masculine and feminine expressions. There is a less fragmentation in the form of the separation of polarity. And there's also a desire to claim something that is a birthright or a truth. So I want this. This is my truth. I know that I want both of these expressions of being because it is a direct representation of this is within me. And the feminine also has this. So the feminine in each of these points wants to be with man and woman, but can't see how that reality could ever be created. Both will want it. One will consciously know it. The other one will be sitting in the shadows. And so this is where it gets complex, is they will both all be mirroring exactly the same thing. They all want this love triangle, but none of them know how to do it. One of them will be sitting, one of the feminines, it will be a subconscious desire that they're too afraid to admit to themselves. And the other one will be very overt about it, that it becomes a pressure, a fear, and an uncomfortability. And so the psyche has one on the forefront, one on the subconscious, whereas the masculine's very open in the form of, hells yes, I want you both, and this is what I desire. But he also brings up his own insecurities in that he becomes then fearful that they will choose each other and that he will be left out of the Trinity altogether because he's substituting his feminine energy. So he goes, the masculine in the seventh dimension knows he cannot be a woman. And what happens with that is he is not recognizing that no, he can't be a woman. But if he starts to cultivate his own feminine energy, if he starts to connect with the divine spirit, if he starts to be that of the divine expression of woman, connect to Mother Geia and hold this, he actually is unified within himself and he can express however he desires, so that he would be what the woman is seeking from each other, right? Because they're showing more of a unified, a man being more of a man, a woman being more of a woman, yet the confusion is the split of the man thinks he can't be his feminine, and the women feel as though they cannot have both feminine and masculine. So see how that's reversed, and it's counterintuitive, always mirroring back and forward. The man thinks he can't be feminine. The feminine thinks she has to be with one of them, that she can't receive just, she either has to just receive masculine or just receive feminine, but that's not how her expression of consciousness is in the form. She can receive both, and that's where she feels, if she's not receiving both, that she's without something. She feels as though she's missing something. And so this opportunity here is where In the difference of the one-dimensional, what happens is the energy is actually channeled from the earth up. So the energy is not coming from higher dimensions in the seventh, it's coming from lower dimensions. And it's confused and it diverts through, and no one's actually receiving it. So it bounces back. It's an inability to be able to receive. It's an inability to be able to have this beautiful opportunity to connect, because the masculine can't receive his own feminine and the feminine doesn't know how to receive both. And this dynamic is probably the one that is the most chaotic and the most conflicting, because there's an inability to see outside of collective conditioning. There's an inability to see beyond the seventh dimension into what you would call a more unity experience. There's I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to have both. I don't know how to receive my own feminine energy. I don't know how to be vulnerable. I don't know how to X, Y, and Z. So there's a lot of uncomfortability. There's a lot of shadow work. There's a lot of things that come up in the form of, where have I limited myself as a being in the seventh dimension? Where have I limited reality? Where have I limited my perspective? Where have I limited my visions? And so the seventh dimensional expression of the love triangle is the one that holds probably the most conscious work, because you're at a higher dimensional interpretation, which means you can have more conscious work and you're moving from more information in that realm of restriction and discomfort of calibration. That then gives you the opportunity, remembering that in each of these you can drop. You could be at the 7 dimension, and then when you drop into the 3-dimensional functioning of the human reality, it works out fine, and then something shifts. So you can bounce, and that makes things a little bit more complex. Now, when we move into the 11th dimensional expression of the love triangle, what happens is a level of what you'd call unity. Now, unity means that each and every being needs to be functioning at the 11th dimensional embodiment and groundedness. And this shows very much the beginning stages of what we spoke about at the start of this conscious education of evolution and the perception of the love triangle, in regards to where it came from, is that it's not quite back at that God presence, because it's a one-directional union. Now, when you get to the 11th dimension, the man, the masculine, actually knows how to give and receive. The feminine knows how to give and receive. And they know how to be with both their masculine energy and their feminine energy. They know how to experience themselves through the feminine desires, and then they also know how to be in purpose in their masculine penetration. So each individual, male and female, know how to be this for themselves, which means they get to dance between the realms of giving it to each other. So what will happen is the cycle of energy will spin in one direction or another. So the masculine will give to this feminine, and then the feminine will give to this feminine, and the feminine here will give to the masculine. When he is able to give to her, and she's able to give here and give there, then the receiving is in the reverse. So you can't receive from both. So that's where it's confusing, is he can give to her, but he can't give to her. He can only receive from her. So they play into the dynamics of man and woman, where he plays the masculine giving role and she'll receive from him, where in here he'll play the feminine and receive from her, and it is flipped. So the masculine will be in his feminine in fullness or his masculine in fullness, and the woman will dance in their feminine. One will be in her full feminine expression or her full masculine expression, and that's how it works with each other, because one of the women will be in her feminine or in her masculine in that form. So they choose to be in one identity of self or another. I'm either in my divine feminine or in my divine masculine, depending on which partner I'm with. And that cycles around, and it will shift and move, and it will rotate the other way if the other way is harmonious. So it will depend on what is the most synergistic, but it will reverse over different times. Now, maybe it will be sexually, they all go in this direction, but in 3-dimensional life, they go in this direction. So the woman who might be more feminine in the bedroom or the romantic side of things might be the woman that might be more feminine in the romantic side of things will maybe be more masculine in her day-to-day three-dimensional life. And the woman that is more feminine in her three-dimensional life might be more masculine in the bedroom in the form of how they experience that and have a harmonious connection. Now, this is the prime point of recognizing where one is still tethering between polarity, still choosing to not see themselves as both masculine and feminine simultaneously, where the masculine has an opportunity and each feminine have an opportunity to realize that they're still tethering. They're still not fully unified, where their masculine is their feminine and their feminine is their masculine, and they get to be able to ascend into a higher expression, which was the origin point, where the masculine holds more chi, more energy, and the feminine holds a spirit connection, and they work in tandem. And what happens is they're able to receive from the higher realms through the feminine, and the masculine is able to anchor through the lower realms, and they dance together. It is not divided, but there is a harmonious expression when none of them step into a role. So they will be in union in their day-to-day life, and there'll be union in their sexual expression. So that means that the energy is not give or take, it actually orbs through their experience. It's generated through in the above, in the below, the inner and the outer, because they've actually mastered all of these different dimensional ways of interpreting energy. And it's only when you've mastered each realm that you can go into the next step and interpret it and understand it. So it's not that these are wrong in any way. They all work, and they're all teaching masculine and feminine polarity into union. They're all teaching directional consciousness or sexual expression in the form of above, below, inner and outer, receiving, giving, and experiencing in the totality, the beingness. And this is something that will present itself to anyone who is evolving, whether it becomes something that is sexual or whether it is just something that is shown through the form of sexual energy in the dynamic of masculine and feminine relating. It is a teacher, it is a guide, it is guiding you to come into the center point of your being. It's also guiding you to master the reality that it is bringing it up from. So it shows you the keys, the codes, and the interpretation of how love triangles are not something that never works. It's that we don't have the conceptual understanding of how to make them work that is supportive for our experience. So I hope that you enjoyed this beautiful, conscious education of evolution and perspective of the love triangle. Please like, follow, share this with anyone that you may feel would benefit from this information. And like, comment, share, where have you functioned from in this form of the love triangle? Has it been romantic? Have you been confused? Have you been in a point of misunderstanding? And we're going to invite you to like, subscribe, and keep following my channel, because we're going to talk a little bit around sexuality, abundance, wealth in some of our upcoming educational consciousness series, where you're able to understand how this energy and the Trinity works in the form of wealth, abundance, and the maintenance of chi and sexuality for creation. If you would like to receive any personal sessions, or you would like to come into our community where we do transmissions, alchemy, and we transmute these distortions by allowing ourselves to come into the 0 point, please follow the links below. Until next time, thank you for your time, your presence, and your witness. Okay, I love you.